Welcome. I'm Craig DeRoche, and welcome to Conversations with Craig. I happen to be that Craig, and I'm the CEO and president of the Family Policy Alliance in Colorado Springs. Today, we've got a great show for you, and I want you, those of you that are listening and that have tuned in, thank you for being here. We're going to ask you to like, comment, and share this video. You can also ask us questions, and we'll try to find time to have our guest answer some of those questions. Last week, pro-lifers around the country celebrated because the Supreme Court, the United States Supreme Court, chose not to stop an important law from going into effect in Texas. The law is known as the Texas Heartbeat Act, which protects babies from abortion if they have a beating heart, just like you and I. It's a huge victory, and the one that's worth celebrating for sure for our cause. It was such a big victory, actually, that Nancy Pelosi herself thinks that unless Congress passes and codifies Roe versus Wade into law, that abortions may become a thing of the past in many states in America. What a glorious day that will be. Today, I have with me Jonathan Saenz, president of the Texas Values, one of the nation's greatest leaders on the pro-life cause. And he leads a family policy council, and we're blessed to work with him in Texas. Jonathan is a lawyer who's been working on family policy issues for 2 decades, including several years at the First Liberty Institute. He brings a wealth of knowledge and many victories with him, and we're going to get into some of those today. Thank you for joining us, Jonathan.
It's great to be with you, Craig.
And it's great to be with you as well. First things first, can you tell us a little bit more about the new law? What is the Texas Heartbeat Act? We're all seeing it whether it's the mainstream media or our friendly media, and what makes it unique from the Heartbeat Acts that other states have worked on?
Well, the Texas Heartbeat Law is very simple. If an unborn baby's heartbeat is detected, that life is protected. And we know there's a lot of interest about the law. We've got a website set up to make it easy for people. Go to texasheartbeatlaw.com. texasheartbeatlaw.com, and you'll find a lot of great information. You'll find answers to frequently asked questions. And look, last week, just an extraordinary week. I say it was an emotional week when you think about having an impact on issues of life and death. It's no exaggeration when it comes to the Texas Heartbeat Law. That is the reality. As a matter of fact, the law went into effect on September 1st. We're now at day 9. And if we predict the estimated number of babies that lose their lives to abortion in the state of Texas every day, we've saved over 1,000 lives already, because we know possibly as high, if not more, of 90% of abortions are performed after 5 or 6 weeks. And even though the law doesn't say 5 or 6 weeks, it's about when the heartbeat is detected. We know that that's commonly as early as the heartbeat can be detected. And the law is really simple too, as far as its function. The abortionist has to check for a heartbeat before an abortion is performed. And if the doctor performs an abortion after there is a detectable heartbeat, that abortionist is subjected to civil litigation. So citizens, anyone in the state of Texas, can file in state court, and they can seek $10,000, if not more, in a judgment against an abortion doctor to make it clear how important, how serious it is to take the life of an innocent human being and to also violate this Texas law. And I can talk a little bit more about some things that are different as it relates to the litigation and as it relates to this legal mechanism that we've seen in a few other states before, but for many people is new and unique.
Well, we'll get into that in a second, but first, this seemed like it came out of nowhere, but it didn't. It came through a lot of hard work for decades and decades, really since Roe. Folks like you and I that are in the fight now, we stand on the shoulders of the giants that got us here. But when was the law passed? You already said it's 9 days into effect, but tell everybody a little bit about Texas Values and the role that your organization, we're going to share with people a link so they know how to support you in this important work that you're going to have to defend now, because people are coming at you. We're going to let people know how they can get behind your organization and do this. But when did you pass the law, and what role did you play in passing the law?
No, I appreciate that, Craig. You see, I've got my cross behind me. Satan is coming after our law. Okay, there's a satanic temple entity that is now sued to try to stop the law or to try to get around it. And I won't get into the details of that. But yes, the forces of darkness and others have descended on the Texas Heartbeat Law and a lot of other people are going to do everything they can. But we have a U.S. Supreme Court ruling. But I'll take us back a little bit. The Texas legislature meets every other year, so in odd years. So that was this year. Our legislative session is 140 days. It ends typically towards the end of May. And so we had our legislative session earlier this year. The Texas heartbeat law was a priority for the House and the Senate, and the governor of our great state, Governor Greg Abbott. This was something that early on he cared about a lot, and he talked about publicly. There was bipartisan support for the Texas heartbeat law. But anytime there's pro-life issues, we know that it can be a little bit challenging or it can draw a lot of attention. But we got there. We got bipartisan support. We got this law passed. And towards the end of May, and actually the bill was signed into law before the legislative session was even over. It did move a little bit quicker because it was a priority item for leaders in the Texas House and the Texas Senate, including our Lieutenant Governor and our Governor Greg Abbott. And so our organization is a nonprofit organization, a family policy council. We're a 501c3. We're a Christian organization. And like our other friends in other states, there's about 40 of us in other throughout the country where we have state policy-focused nonprofit organizations. Our organization, Texas Values, has been around since 2012. We are 2 blocks from our state capitol. You know, government belongs to those who show up. We hear it all the time. So in order to have that proximity, but just about everything you can think of, A to Z, being involved in what the language looks like for pieces of legislation, testifying for and against, doing a lot of media work. I have a weekly radio show. We do Facebook Lives. We're on radio and television interviews. But a complete package for advocacy for pieces of legislation is what we do at Texas Values. The Texas heartbeat law was a top priority for us. We've been working on this for 2, if not 3 years back to get to a point to where it would become law and go into effect as it did on September 1st.
Well, praise God for that. And praise God that Texas Values is such a strong and growing organization. We've posted the link a couple of times. We encourage everybody tuning in right now from wherever you are in the country to help them out. We need to support them as Jonathan has properly pointed out. The evil one does not like that this law has passed and the impact it's going to make. And you talked a little bit about how it's different from other heartbeat acts in the enforcement. Can you share with those that are at home that don't understand how the sausage gets made in legislature, but the innovation that you've come up with that seems to have confounded that absolute Roe ruling, which was an abomination in America, but that confounded this court where they said, well, we're not going to step in. It's the citizen-led enforcement is one of the initiative or one of the innovations of what you've created down there in Texas. What does that mean?
Well, that's right, Craig. And look, I know I'm doing the interview. There'll be a lot of focus on me and sort of maybe what I did individually, but I want to make sure I acknowledge you don't get to a place like this with a piece of legislation and now the Texas heartbeat law without it being a group and a coalition effort. That includes Family Policy Alliance. So many members of your team, Craig, were supportive of the Texas heartbeat law, while some people were just trying to get an idea of what it does and wonder whether or not it would work, because other states have passed heartbeat laws, but those have been struck down in court. So a lot of great organizations and individual leaders that were a part of getting us to this point and having the Texas heartbeat law. So I want to make sure I make that clear and really say thank you to your team and many others that have helped us get to this point. One of the key differences in the Texas heartbeat law is this civil enforcement mechanism. And that really ties into my point too about coalition efforts and working together. This is what we do in society, right? We look out for each other. That's what citizens do. They should have a role in protecting what we think is right and what we think is just. And nothing, could really be greater than that, than the protection of innocent human life. And so any citizen can go into civil court and they can file a state action to enforce the Texas law. And the reason, or one of the things that's key about that means the government is not involved in the equation. So I mentioned that other heartbeat laws have been passed, but they've been struck down. Typically, it's because the abortion groups make the argument that it's a constitutional violation of their so-called right to an abortion, that when that happens, the government is enforcing a law. You only have a constitutional right or a constitutional violation if the government is trying to infringe upon, if you will, or take that right away. That is not a part of the equation in the Texas heartbeat law, which means that the abortion groups cannot sue in court prior to this law going into effect to say that this is going to take away my constitutional right to a so-called constitutional right to abortion. They tried to do that still. Okay, they did still try to do that, but that's why we saw the courts come back and say, that's not how this law works. The government's not involved in enforcing it, so you can't make those constitutional claims. Most pro-life laws never go into effect on the day that they're supposed to. It's usually a long time later if we get some type of victory. And that's a key distinction in the Texas heartbeat law. And I think you'll see other states follow that strategic approach, whether it's in a heartbeat law or other pro-life measures as we move forward.
Well, it is very wise, and it's in the great tradition of how our country was founded, the constitutional rights we have, and first among them is life, and that's every citizen's responsibility, and I love that you've given the citizens back the authority to fight for those lives. Now, a lot of people, Jonathan, they say that people just care, that are pro-life organizations, about preventing the abortion. They don't care about the mother or the child and what happens after. I don't believe that to be true for a second. I see the good work that everybody does. Can you share how Texans have been involved in responding to care for the women and children that we pray, as you say, maybe even 1,000 more will be born because of this act, and if it's approved in other states, maybe millions of more American children, children of color, children of different races and creeds and cultures, and welcomed into America and to be celebrated. What are you doing at Texas Values for those children and for the women?
Well, I think it's important, Craig, as people get to know a little bit more about the Texas heartbeat law and about these issues of life, to be aware that there's close to 55,000 abortions that are performed every year in the state of Texas. That is a huge number. Now, that number's come down a lot over the past 10 or so years with some other pro-life measures like the sonogram law and so on. It's still a big number. And it's very concerning when you think about that high number of loss of life. And so being in a position where we hope to see more lives that are saved, that are going to be born for decades. You've had nonprofit charitable entities, pregnancy care centers that have been a part of the effort in Texas, walking alongside women that either they're in crisis or maybe they're having a financial struggle or whatever it is. They need somebody to walk alongside them through this process of having a child and starting a family. And I think there are close to 200 of these type of centers or facilities in organizations throughout the state of Texas. So just about any county you're in or wherever you're in the 254 counties in the state of Texas, you're likely to find a pregnancy care center close by. And if you need help with that, reach out to us and we'll get you connected because we're friends with a lot of them. But in addition to that, the state has taken a role with their Alternatives to Abortion project and function. That's a lot of funding and a lot of state entities that are involved in the process of supporting women and families and children, particularly when children are born at the beginning of the process as well. And so it goes into the millions. That number grows every year. And a lot of times you'll see bipartisan support of that. And so whether it's the state government or the people a lot of times that are pro-life that are volunteering that time to help in these pregnancy resource centers, there is a tremendous amount of support out there for women that are making these decisions. And, we expect more babies that are going to be born. I mean, our view and our work on the life issue does not just exist for the baby in the womb, even though that is tremendously important. It's after the baby is born as well, and as things move forward for those families.
Well, thank you. And that's an important distinction. And I wanted our audience to know that, and others that might check in on this video later, to understand that people sometimes, while you run a nonpartisan organization, and this is a bipartisan bill, people tend to lump people into, well, you're a conservative, you don't support that. And it's simply not true. Organizations, Christian organizations, frequently support resources, both from the church and charitable, but as well as from the government for our children, and the parents, the mothers that are in crisis that don't have the means to support the children. And I'm glad you were able to address that. You actually defended pregnancy care centers directly. Not a lot of people would know that about Texas Values. Can you tell us the story about how that's required, that even the evil one, as you say, and the forces here on the ground in Texas, they're even trying to stop the care centers that help these women in crisis facilitate them having a healthy baby and giving them the best chance possible. Talk a little bit about your work in defending that work that forget about nonpartisan. Everybody should recognize that if a woman, a mother needs help, that there should be care centers to help those prospective mothers.
Well, Craig, at Texas Values, we work on the principles of faith, family, and freedom. And we do that in the arenas of the courts, the legislature, and the media. Now, as an attorney myself, I've had a lot of experience in litigation and court cases, but we don't do a lot of that work. We have a lot of great friends and organizations that primarily focus on court cases and litigation. But time to time, it's necessary, and from time to time, we're in a unique position to get directly involved in court cases. And a lot of times it plays out in amicus briefs to the U.S. Supreme Court. But the issue you're talking about, a few years ago, we were directly involved in a court case that happened in the city of Austin, where our office is located and where a lot of the 12 members of our team live and have our family lives and are a part of helping volunteer for these pregnancy resource centers. So the city of Austin passed a new ordinance several years ago that really was targeted to make it difficult for these pregnancy resource centers to do the great work that they do. And some of it felt like it was directed towards their Christian beliefs. Whatever the case may be, it became very clear as the lawsuit played out that government officials wanted less people to go to these pregnancy centers and really wanted to try to find ways to discourage them from doing that. And the way they did it was unconstitutional, trying to control certain speech, trying to make them put up signs where the government would be speaking on behalf of them. Long story short, we filed a lawsuit, even though there were several warnings and opportunities for the city to see that they were going to lose. They chose to fight the issue, and it cost them dearly. We won this case in federal court. And as a result of that, there were hundreds of thousands of dollars of attorney's fees that had to be paid. And it was difficult for those pregnancy centers. This is not what they do. And so we walked alongside them through this litigation, but also a lot of the media attention. But through that, the media attention allowed more people to be aware of their existence and their resources. Thankfully, got the victory. And after that, a lot of these pregnancy resources got stronger and more of them developed, knowing that they didn't have to worry anymore about the city taking away their constitutional rights.
Amazing work. And again, a blessing that we're talking with Jonathan Saenz, who's the president and leader of the Texas Values, a wonderful organization that played such a critical role in the passage of the Texas Heartbeat Act that we're all hearing about nationally here. After decades of passing laws and attempts to protect the lives of the unborn. I think of it as like justice for babies, to put it in 2021 speak. You know, the social justice advocates out there doing this and chipping away at it. And just, I wanted to highlight that it just seems so ghoulish to me that people would try to prevent a mother from making a choice, a fully informed choice. And you had mentioned the sonogram law earlier as we talked. That's had an impact too, and that's been fought as well. And why wouldn't we want a prospective mother to know that that person growing inside of them is not tissue? It's not DNA that's ever been on this earth before. It's a new person created in the image of God, and we have no idea the potential of that life. You guys passed the sonogram law, and it did make an effect, not by through a mandate, but just by letting that mother know what was going on in the miracle of creation in her own womb. Tell us about the journey and why that law has mattered getting to this point today.
Sure. Well, and the Texas sonogram law was one of the marquee pieces of legislation and ultimately laws that was one of the first accomplishments of our current Lieutenant Governor, Dan Patrick, always a pro-life supporter and a pro-life champion. And he demonstrated that when he served as a Senate member and now our Lieutenant Governor of our state for many years. And, you know, this was always about informed choice. And it's like the heartbeat issue as well. These are things that are just common when it comes to the pregnancy time period and that whole experience, right? People want to hear that heartbeat when they go into the doctor's office of their child. It's such a key and pivotal moment. It's just something natural for us as well. It's a universal symbol and signal of life. The sonogram law was a similar experience. people expect, a mother expects they're going to get a chance to see that baby and see some form of it at some time. And it's something that many of them look forward to. And so, but we also know it's a way for the woman, the mother, to connect visually. That technology has been incredible. It's led to people in the abortion movement leaving the abortion movement because they could see the baby, and it's hard to deny that humanity. But we also know that when women see the sonogram, many times they choose to keep the child in their womb. And we know when they go to abortion centers, even though they might perform a sonogram, we would hear stories of them turning the screen away, not allowing the woman see it, to discourage or deceive them about what was really on the screen. This is not an informed choice. And so, but as a result of that law being passed and signed into law, I believe it was in 2011, we have seen a dramatic reduction from around 80,000 or so of abortions now to about 55, still high numbers. But I mean, to see that drop, we know that means that now that women have all the accurate information, many of them are making the decision they would have wanted to make to begin with, which is to keep their child, the baby, in their womb and to see that life be born.
Well, I could make so many metaphors that would outrage those that are opposed to us about women being able to make a choice, and folks that are fighting women, mothers with a baby in their womb, from having the information they need to make a choice. And that's happening in America. It happened in America prior to the passage of the sonogram law. So thank you for that and the work. And Jonathan, our audience here has been hearing a lot about the law. They've been hearing a lot about Texas and your unique constitution. And of course, a lot of people joke about it. It's a separate country within our country, and it's facilitated, this type of innovation, which is to be praised. But they haven't heard a lot about you, and you have a long history here. And I want our audience to learn more about Jonathan Saenz. You were involved in law school. You put your law career on the line in order to stand up for life. What happened then in the pro-life Cougars case?
Sure, Craig. And look, as people are watching and following along, just want to remind them, great information at texasheartbeatlaw.com. Great information about this new extraordinary pro-life law that we have. And, look, I can talk to you. I can spend the whole interview to you talking about Texas. You start talking about, what's great about Texas. One of the sayings we have in Texas is, it ain't bragging if it's true. And so we're a real proud, bunch of people in Texas. I'm fifth generation Texan. Both sides of my family are from the state of Texas, going back, almost to the beginning of our state, and maybe at the time period when it was briefly its own country and a republic. But at an early age for me, I witnessed things regarding senses of justice. And I sometimes saw the government take away things from people that it wasn't right. And I didn't come from a background of attorneys. And so it really mattered to me for the right things to be done or to stand up for what's right. And as a Christian, as my Christian values and my own Christian identity and my own really time becoming a Christian started to mature, I started to think about, how can I take these issues of justice that I care about and maybe be a voice for somebody else? And I started to see what was happening to Christians, having their religious rights taken away, not being able to pray over their meals at school, and a lot of variety of things that our friend Jay Sekulow would talk about on his radio show. And I was always very pro-life as well. And so I found myself in law school really wanting to become an advocate and do the work I do now. But during that time period, the pro-life group on our campus was in this struggle with the university that was trying to deny them their rights to have their free speech rights. And some of it's religiously motivated for many of us. And they were just treating the group unfairly. And they were so hostile to the group that they had lost all their members except for one. And that one member filed a lawsuit against the university. She was about to graduate, though, when I came along. And so if we know anything about that, to keep the case going, you've got to have a group. And you at least have to have one member. So it was passed on to me. I became the second member and really the only member of the group for a brief amount of time to keep the lawsuit going. But I was really not expecting things to take off like this for me. And here I was wanting to prepare to become a lawyer, an advocate, and I found myself the client. But I knew at that moment that it was really on me. And I felt that tap on my shoulder that there was nobody else to look to. It was for me to do it. I stepped forward. It was difficult at times. I knew it was the right thing to do. And I just trusted God and stayed the course. We had our great friends at Alliance Defending Freedom that were the lawyers on the case. And thankfully we were successful and we got a victory in that case. But the real victory was when we were allowed to have our event later that year while I was still in law school. And we had such a great turnout. And one woman in particular that we know of came to that event and was pregnant and was being pressured to have an abortion. And when she left our event, she had decided she was going to keep the baby in her womb. That was the real victory.
Praise God. Amazing, amazing. And I just love how God has led you on this course and given you what you can handle and what you were the right person to do. And
well, Craig, there's not many people that can say, when they were a law student that they sued their university, but it's always easier to talk about it when you win. But there were great people that were a part of that as well. And, I wouldn't be the person I am today and the ability to advocate on others had I not been in that situation myself. So it was a true blessing.
Absolutely. Well, Jonathan, we've got a lot of friends watching this. I'm looking at the feed of questions and check-ins, and you got Washington, Virginia, Florida, Maryland, Missouri, Kansas, Michigan, California. California's here. A lot of folks from Texas, Chicago, Colorado, Indiana, you name it. And inquiring minds want to know what's next for the pro-life movement. They're on here because they want to know what can be done in their state and what this means and what you're looking at for the future in Texas. So could you let our audience know kind of what's next?
Wow, what a special week all of us that are pro-lifers had last week. And it's not just the state of Texas. Look, Roe versus Wade started in Texas. So sometimes it can feel a little more personal to us. But, I was born 9 months after Roe versus Wade in September of 1973. It's always meant a lot to me. And many of us always sort of have our experiences, right? I think maybe we're all born pro-life just sort of naturally, but there's typically a moment where we feel like we became pro-life. And so last week, I thought about it last week and this week, I want everyone to feel like they can share in this victory. If you've been pro-life, you've had some role in us getting to the point where we were last week. Not only the Texas heartbeat law going into effect, but on the same day, Craig, that it went into effect, we had a Supreme Court ruling that made it clear the law could continue to go into effect and to be utilized. And so I just think it's just a historic moment for law and for life that we all can embrace and feel good about and feel like we all played a role in. But that means we've got a role moving forward as well. I think a real key is for us to do the best we can as a pro-life movement to stay united, to continue to talk to each other and to continue to communicate about things we're thinking about moving forward. So if you're looking at strategic efforts in your state, I invite you to communicate with our office, to send me an email. You can drop it there if you want, but it's on our website, Craig, but jsaenz@txvalues.org. People can use my personal direct email. I'll check it, or they can contact our office and find out how we did things in the state of Texas. TexasHeartbeatLaw.com is a website with some good information, but it's going to be different in your state. And it may not be the time to sort of move forward more aggressively, depending on what the courts are doing in your state or the circuit, the federal courts are happening. So I think we need to be really smart about how we move forward and not in a situation where maybe some mistakes are made because people just sort of carbon copy the Texas heartbeat law. It's going to work different in different parts of the country. But the more that we also see this as a moment of a place that we've arrived, because culturally, we're in a better position where people care more about the life issue. They understand the humanity of it. And so, I invite people to go to the website a lot, but whatever information you can get that is accurate, so we can keep talking about these issues and we can keep seeing these as opportunities to educate people, not only about what some of these laws do, but about the humanity of the unborn child, why it matters, how they can continue to get resources. But I do think, while the pro-life movement has grown up a lot over the past couple of decades, there's so much activity. Sometimes we're not always aware of what each other are doing. And so the more that we can stay connected, the more that we can stay united and support each other and be in communication about how we move forward strategically, I think that's going to be so important for us to continue to build on what happened last week in the direction that the Supreme Court very well may be going. And I don't think it's an exaggeration at all that we could see a lot of discussion and a possibility of Roe versus Wade falling. But that's not the end if it does. Then we still have work to do in our states to make sure as the issue comes back to the state that we're prepared, not just legally and legislatively, but also culturally talking about these issues. And so those are some initial thoughts that I have. And we've been doing a lot of this already over the past week. And I appreciate the invitation of being on this show, because that gives us an opportunity to connect with more people and us as a pro-life movement to see the value when we stay in good communication, we stay united, and we stay connected. Because as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, there are going to be attacks coming at us from all different directions. And so, it's a real blessing to be where we are, but there is a lot more work to do moving forward.
Well, amen. And yes, there is. And our guest today has been Jonathan Saenz. He's the president of Texas Values. Please, please, please check out their organization. Support them where you can. The link is below as I'm talking right now. We did get a question in, Jonathan, we didn't get a chance to get to, from our friend in California, who I'll call Early Bird by their handle, that wants us to talk about chemical abortions and
Sure.
pills. We'll talk about that, Early Bird, in a future conversation with Craig. We just want you to know we heard you. That's a big deal. And the pro-life movement, Texas and all the states are concerned about. And we're going to talk more about that in future episodes. We encourage you to check it out. We encourage you to stay tuned. We're going to have more conversations coming forward. Please share this with your friends. Send links. Please check out Texas Values. Thank you, Jonathan, again for being on the show with us today.
Well, I appreciate it, Craig. And quick shout out your team, Autumn, John Paulton, Nicole Hudgens, and so many of the members of Family Policy Alliance has been one of our strongest partners and allies for the work in our state. And we really appreciate that. We look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you. God bless.
Yes, sir.